One day a young teenager will be reincarnated in another world. During his journey he will meet many people he can trust. A boy wakes up in the middle of a forest. He doesn't remember who he is or what his name is. A voice speaks to him from his mind. That voice explains that he has been chosen to be reincarnated, but why he did not remember anything, as he had decided to lose his past memories in exchange for magical abilities in this new world. That voice explains that she is the goddess of reincarnation and will be accompanying him on his journey. The boy was still confused. The goddess tells him that his name is Kelvin. He heads to a nearby city. Everything around him was very different from what he knew, but he could not remember anything of his past. It was just a feeling. Something very rare for him. As he did not remember anything, he decided to move on in this new life. As she walked, the goddess told him that he had fallen completely in love with her, but as he had wished to forget his memories, he did not remember. Arriving at the Adventurers Guild, Kelvin decided to sign up as a new adventurer. The goddess told him that this way he could earn money. She also asked him not to give too many details of his stats, as they were different. The receptionist handed him his adventurer's credential, and she also explained the functioning of the levels of power within the guild, where the lowest was the F rank and the highest was the S rank. Kelvin was the F rank, and requests a mission at his level. He had to take down some slimes in the forest. Arriving at the place, he began to hinder his mission to take down the slimes, as they were powerful, but in reality Kelvin was very weak. The goddess tells him to use his summoner skills and make a pact with the slime so that he can control it. Thanks to the goddess, Kelvin manages to make a pact with that slime. The previous battle caused Kelvin to level up. He now had more experience and mana. He summoned the slime he defeated and began hunting the remaining ones. He returned to the Adventurers Guild and collected his reward. While walking through the city he realized that in this world there were also slaves. He simply looked and walked away. He decided to look for a place to stay and found an inn. The manager seemed very friendly and had good seasoning in the kitchen. Despite having no memory of his past, he was ready for more adventures and in search of new packs to make. Kelvin is again at the guild in search of quests. The receptionist Ange already knew him, as he always came to the Adventurers Guild. She reports that he has leveled up to rank E, after accomplishing some simple missions. The receptionist asks her to find a group so she can accomplish the missions with ease, but Kelvin says he is on his own. The other adventurers were envious of this boy, but Kelvin simply ignored them. A blonde boy approaches him and asks to join their group in order to accomplish a more difficult mission. The other adventurers started to laugh. Kelvin knew something was not right and decides to use a full analysis skill and realizes that this person was a murderer. Kelvin knew this was a trap, but decided to accept since he was confident in his abilities. Later the blonde-haired boy met with two other people. He reports that he has a new victim to have fun with. This boy and his group were known as the Rookie Hunters. The next day they all had to meet in a dungeon to defeat some undead. When the evildoers arrived at the place they realized that Kelvin had defeated most of the skeletons. They thought Kelvin was a weakling whom they could defeat easily, but it was not so. Kelvin tells them that he knew of their desire to kill him, so he asks them to come and fight straight out. The thieves are proud and decide to confront Kelvin, but are quickly defeated. Kelvin had become powerful in recent days thanks to the goddess's advice. Now all that was left was to fight the boss of this dungeon, and that was an undead knight. This pair begins to have a pleasant chat. Despite having a cold appearance, this gentleman was someone sympathetic. The knight explains that long ago he served a king. As much time had passed, he wanted to have a new master to serve, but he had to be very strong. Kelvin understood. If he wanted to have a new pact, he will have to defeat this gentleman. The two have an arduous battle where they seem very evenly matched, but with Kelvin's cunning he managed to defeat that knight. That man is called Gerard. A long time ago an elf had come to demand that they surrender and be his slaves, but the king obviously did not accept. Then that elf had cursed them for fools. As the days passed, everyone in the kingdom began to die for no reason, including his family. For the sole purpose of revenge he had become the living dead. The battle was over. That knight made a pact with the protagonist. Kelvin handed over the thieves and the mission to the Adventurers Guild. Obviously, this event attracted the attention of people with more power, such as the leader of the Adventurers Guild. The leader of the Adventurers Guild was waiting for him. That man had suspicions about this boy. He used the clinical eye skill, an ability to analyze very similar to that of the protagonist. This man knows that Kelvin is very powerful. Kelvin could not have guessed that he would meet a very strong man in this city, but since he had already been discovered, he has no choice but to admit that he is indeed powerful. The guild leader tells him that he doesn't want to cause trouble. On the contrary, he wants to get along with Kelvin. That old man explains that he realized he wanted to go unnoticed, but sooner or later he will need their help, so he asks them to cooperate. Kelvin wanted to make friends with powerful people. He gladly accepted. After the meeting, Kelvin was informed that he was upgraded to B rank, being congratulated by the innkeeper. As he rests in his room, he realizes that it was necessary to have more allies to rely on. It couldn't be just anyone, it had to be someone who has some power. He remembered that he had seen some slave girls. He had already made a pact with a slime and knight. He needed a mage to help him in the rear. Using his clinical eye, Kelvin found the girl he was looking for. She was a half-human elf. Even though she was very pretty, no one wanted to buy her because she had a curse on her body. Any person who touched it ended up being burned. Kelvin asked the goddess of his mind how he could save her. The goddess told him that he only had to have level a spiritual magic. Since the day he saw this girl, Kelvin had been practicing this type of magic. After buying her from the elf, he did not hesitate to use spirit magic, freeing Ethel from her curse. She for the first time in her life could feel the touch of another human being. After saving her, Kelvin took this girl to the room he was renting, and with the help of the innkeeper, she had a better outfit. From now on they started living together. Kelvin's plan was paying off, as she was a great help to them. As a group, they had improved considerably in battle. This group work led Kelvin to rise to a rank, which is something spectacular, since very few people reach that rank. The receptionist, who had seen Kelvin and Ethel's progress, decides to invite them to a coffee shop. Later, Kelvin was waiting for the girls. The two girls were looking very pretty. This already looked like a date. When suddenly a man shows up to ruin their reunion. That person claims to be a prince of another kingdom and orders the slave to be handed over to him, but Kelvin beats the crap out of all these conceited people. After beating him up, they decide to leave, but at night Ethel was more affectionate than ever. Kelvin says they need a bigger house. The next morning Kelvin was called by the guild leader. It turns out that a very dangerous demon appeared in one of the low-level dungeons. Kelvin wanted to refuse to participate because he thought it would be dangerous to go, but the guild leader tells him that if he doesn't accept he will have problems, because Kelvin had beaten a prince from another kingdom and that would bring problems to the Adventurers Guild and the country. Kelvin had no choice but to agree. He and his group left for the dungeon, where other adventurers were waiting for them. Kelvin's group enters the dungeon. A demon was inside waiting for them. Inside there was a sealed girl. The demon explains that this girl was neither more nor less than the daughter of the king of demons. If they wanted to save her, they will have to defeat him. Seeing the power that this demon had, Kelvin became excited, because they would be facing a being more powerful than him. That demon sends some minions to fight Kelvin, but they are easily defeated. The demon understood that these adventurers were not weak at all. He decided to introduce himself. His name is Victor. Starting the fight is very difficult for both sides, giving their best to each other. The battle will be decided between Kelvin's group skill or Victor's excessive power. One of Ethel's magical powers is about to fall to the sealed girl. Victor saw that he needed to protect her, had no choice but to use his body, being completely wounded. As he prostrated himself on the floor, he accepted defeat. She asks you to listen to her story. A long time ago she was raising the daughter of the third king of the demons. Nobody knew of her existence because she did not want the enemies of the king of the demons to know, so that girl had been interned inside a mansion during her whole life. Victor was the most faithful servant of the third demon king, but one day the hero had come to kill his master. Before dying he sealed his own daughter so that she would not fall into the hands of his enemies. Now he had lost. Kelvin understands her suffering, tells her that he will heal her wounds if she makes a loyalty pact with him. The demon says that he only serves the king of demons. He asks him to please take care of Sira. Shortly after this being had died, Kelvin could understand that demon and promised to take care of Sira. After that they took Sira out of the dungeon. She explains that she had never seen the outside world, she had always been alone, she had to live. That's why she agreed to make the pact with Kelvin. From today Kelvin would be her master. They had decided to go to see the village festival. Sira had never seen anything so beautiful in her life, although for the others it was something normal. Kelvin was officially the A-rank adventurer. The other adventurers had seen his advancement, so they decided to celebrate. He couldn't refuse. After the party she met Sira. She was impressed by this outside world, because it was very noisy. This was very funny for her. The mountains, the city, the people, etc. Everything was very interesting to see. She promised to live as well as possible, so as not to disappoint the people watching her from heaven. Many days later Sira fit in perfectly with the group, and was even given a very powerful weapon. Now that the situation was calmer, Kelvin had a big appetite. More specifically, he wanted to eat rice. Since he came to this world, no one knew about this product, but after some research, he was informed that a nearby kingdom produced rice. With the eagerness to eat rice he headed to those distant lands. During the journey, Sira is surprised at how beautiful and pretty the outside world was. The trip is interrupted by some thieves. They demand that they hand over all their wealth or they will die. Kelvin analyzes the situation and realizes that these thieves are simple weaklings. He asks Sira to take care of them. This girl manages to defeat each of the thieves very easily. Even though they were defeated, they threaten that their boss was someone level 70. The protagonist is intrigued by this. Kelvin's group arrived in the capital, Torridge. The first thing Sira did was go to see the sea, a place full of water as far as the eye could see. The group met with the leader of the Torridge Guild. She explains that the thieves they brought work for a very dangerous adventurer. That man belonged to another kingdom called Trison. If she captures that man it will bring trouble to the kingdom of Torridge. The only one who could stop that adventurer was Kelvin, who came from another kingdom. The protagonist did not want to attract people's attention, so he had a better idea. He found other adventurers who also came from abroad. This guy was neither more nor less than a hero. In a distant dungeon, many people had been kidnapped. These thieves were ruthless. Kelvin and his group arrived ready to defeat these thieves. The plan was simple. They had to defeat all the thieves and say that the hero was the one who saved the kingdom of Torridge. The group defeated each of those corrupt adventurers without much difficulty. The hero along with his party arrived to defeat the thieves, but when they arrived they met some defeated adventurers. The hero says he will not forgive them for what they did. Kelvin provokes these heroes to fight against him, saying that they are just wimps, who are not capable of saving the lives of others. The protagonist had planned to pretend to be the villain to teach him a lesson in power, plus he wanted to know how much power he had against the hero. The fight starts with a direct attack by the hero. Kelvin is happy that they are taking this fight seriously, but he is no wimp either. The protagonist has a lot of advantage and many more skills. Sira and Ethel enjoy the fight as if it were simply a show. The hero is very weak compared to Kelvin. He remembers how he came to this place. He along with his classmates had come to this world thanks to a summoning. They were summoned for the sole purpose of protecting people from the evil villains, regaining their purpose for the fight. The teamwork of these guys was very weak, so Kelvin tells them that they are doing a bad teamwork and explains how they should fight. The hero uses his best skills to fight Kelvin but is still easily defeated. He asks for forgiveness before fainting. After a short while he woke up and found all the people around him in a calm manner. This was unforgivable. The hero was ready to continue with the battle, but he is stopped by a little girl. She had been captured by the robbers. She says that Kelvin is the person who had saved them. The hero understood that he had made a mistake, apologizing for mistaking him for a bandit, but because Kelvin was provoking in the fight. Kelvin also apologizes, as behind his offenses there was a purpose. That's right, Kelvin wanted to prove the worth and value that the hero has. They conceded defeat, but Kelvin would not let them off that easy. The protagonist said goodbye to the people who were kidnapped. This conflict was over, so he also said goodbye to the guild leader. That woman asks where he will go. Kelvin replies that he will go to play a punishment game. The reason why he tested these boys was to know their level. As they were weak, the protagonist decided to train them and make them more powerful. Those boys were invoked by the goddess of reincarnation, the goddess inside Kelvin's mind, plus these boys came from the same place as he did. The hero explains how he came to this world. While chatting quietly in class, they were summoned to this magical world. After a few days of fighting and practicing, the hero says goodbye to Kelvin, promising to meet again sometime. The protagonist was a bit worried and gave them some talismans that would protect them. That same evening they were summoned by the Empress of the Kingdom of Torage. The Empress thanks him for saving her kingdom from those bandits, but says that this will have to be kept a secret, as she does not want to get into trouble with the Tricen Kingdom. If he wants money, anything or anything else, she can provide it. Kelvin is grateful, but the only thing he wanted was to be sold some rice. The Empress is surprised that he only wanted that. She tells him that she will give it to him for free and it is not necessary to buy them. Since that's all it was, he gives them a farewell feast. The boys enjoy the feast with lots of rice and other delicacies. More at night, the Empress had gone to visit Kelvin. She wanted to say thank you in another way. Kelvin notices his employee nearby and apologizes, because he already had 2 girls traveling with him. The Empress understands and does not want to cause any more trouble. She just gives the best encouragement for her next trips. It was time to leave, so that they would not be delayed in their return home. The Empress gave them permission to use a dimensional portal. Had arrived back where it all began, the city of Parth. Kelvin no longer wanted to live in a rented room, so now that he had more money, he decided to buy a house. The group is very happy to have a place to stay. More at night, Kelvin wanted to summon the goddess of his mind. Before he could not do it because he was too weak. Now that he was A rank, he has no difficulties. That goddess was very pretty. She asks how she looks. Kelvin can't deny that he's her type. She's happy about that. The next day, the goddess fit in perfectly with the group. The other boys asked who this lady was. The goddess introduces herself. Her name is Melfina, and she was invoked by Kelvin. She apologizes to Sira because she had nothing to do with her father's death. Sira says that there is no problem since her father was not a saint either and that he overdid some things. Melfina watched Kelvin. She says she earned a blessing for successfully summoning her. both of which had two effects. The first was that for once a month, I wouldn't die in one fell swoop. The second was that he had the ability to summon heroes from another world. Syrah and Melfina were practicing a battle to decide who had the right to spend the night with Kelvin, although Kelvin was not aware of it. In the end, they ended in a tie, saying that they are very strong with each other. Meanwhile, Kelvin couldn't stop thinking about the fact that he could summon other people without their consent. Melfina came to talk to him about it. She explains that she has no choice when she summons new heroes to this world. Every so often, the Demon King is born regardless of the situation. If she does not summon the heroes, this world would be thrown into chaos. In addition, the Demon King had two abilities. The first was that his pure evil increases by a lot, and the second ability was that he could nullify damage. That is why it was necessary to put an end to the King of Demons. He tells her not to worry, as there were two ways to bring heroes to this world. The first was to bring a group of people without their consent, while the second was to bring a person who has died in another world and then resurrect them to this magical world. Both options seemed a bit cruel to him, but he had to do it. The next day he decided to bring a reincarnation. He wanted to fulfill his duty. Besides, Melfina trusted him. Using all his magical abilities, he conjures a portal to bring that new reincarnation to help him fight against the King of Demons. A little girl appeared. Kelvin welcomes her, apologizes for summoning her into this world. The little girl thanks him for bringing her to that place. While he was talking, Kelvin fainted. He had used a lot of magic power in the summoning. For as long as she could remember, she was always hospitalized. Life was never pleasant. She wanted to explore the world. Sadly, she died. She had a new opportunity, as she was called to reincarnate. She went for a walk around this beautiful house, even ran with all her might, something she had never been able to do before. She is very happy. Kelvin asks if she likes this. She tells him that she had been summoned to become a hero, a very difficult process to follow. She will have to fight with many people. If she doesn't like this, Kelvin would send her back to where she came from. She refuses to go back. Before, she was always sick and couldn't even go outside. All she did was read novels. She fantasized about being in a magical world. She wanted to stay here with Kelvin. The protagonist understood. He welcomed him. Having dark hair was something strange, so he asked him that from now on, they should treat each other as brothers. She is more than happy to have a new sibling. She introduces herself and says her name is Rio. Kelvin says she reminds him of a horrible person. He asks her if the name could be changed to Ryan. She says no problem. The next day, the whole group had gone out in search of adventure, but this time, they were not alone. The maids had also come. They had a very low level. The protagonist tells them not to worry since they don't have to do anything. Just by being present in this place, they will go up a few levels, while they will be in charge of eliminating the beasts. This place was a piece of cake for the group, everyone demonstrating their fighting skills. A wolf of high rank appears. This animal seemed very cute and he decides to adopt it to be the new pet, making a pact with it. Ryan is more than happy to have a pet. Some men are heading towards them. They were other adventurers who had come to hunt some beasts. They can observe all the girls who accompanied the protagonist. Those men felt envy and had to leave because of the anger. In the following days, Ryan had been training, now accompanied by a wolf. She is striving to be the strongest heroine. On a quiet night, some men were stalking the house. It was thieves who had murderous intentions. As most of these invaders were weak, he wanted to test Ryan's skills. She had to demonstrate everything she had learned throughout her internship. She says she will comply with your requests. She does not intend to let Kelvin down and confronts these thieves. Together with the pets, she manages to defeat these invaders. In the distance, a man was watching the events, ready to report this event to his superiors. Kelvin had discovered it. Meanwhile, in the kingdom of Trison, the emperor and the generals were discussing the multiple conflicts they had against the other kingdoms. Half of them wanted to have good relations with the other kingdoms, but another half wanted to go to war. The dream of all of them was to unify the continent into one. The last word would be given by a general who did not attend the meeting. The emperor orders him to come immediately. A guard goes in search of the last general. During the search, he can observe that many women were guarding that man. The pestilential smell was coming out of the room. This gentleman reports that he must go immediately to meet with the other generals. This was very urgent. The general says it's a bummer, but he'll go anyway. In the meantime, the protagonist and his group are on their way to fulfill an S-rank mission. They were looking for an elven village. These elves had come from another continent. While Ethel says he is familiar with these places. Then Kelvin remembered why he came. The leader of his guild had informed him that the thieves who attacked him belonged to the kingdom of Trison. In recent days, they have been recruiting many slaves. Probably for a war against the other kingdoms. I had good news for him. I had gotten him the Ascension exam for S rank, for that he needed King Leonhardt's permission, and the mission to ascend was to defeat an S-level beast that was harassing the elves. An arrow stops the tour they were doing. Armed elves ask them to identify themselves. Kelvin quickly introduces himself, saying he has come on behalf of King Leonhardt. The elf elder apologizes for the bad reception, observes Ethel. Frightening on the spot, said she should be dead. The elf apologizes for his words, saying he mistook her for a girl named Lumel who had died long ago. Kelvin was curious and asks me to explain why I thought it was Lumel. About 20 years ago, the elves lived peacefully on another continent, but one day a dragon came looking for revenge, destroying everything around him. None of the elves knew who had caused it. All seemed over, but a brave elf named Lumel had offered to calm his anger, giving herself as his wife. Taking Lumel away from the village. Everyone admired Lumel's sacrifice, but the elves thought that someday the dragon would attack them again and decided to leave the continent. Years later, Lumel's dead body was found. Now that I had seen Ethel, it was obvious to think that this girl was the daughter of that elf and that dragon. This event was very tragic. They decided to talk about the work Kelvin had to do. Lately many elves were being kidnapped. An S-rank beast is causing these problems. This seemed very suspicious. The village had magical barriers to protect them, but they were easily breached. Kelvin offered to improve those barriers. It was night and many Trison soldiers were ready to wipe out the elves' village. These last days they had captured many elves, but today was the final attack to get them all. The commander doesn't know what's going on. Someone was ruining his plans. In the distance, Ethel had been attacking these men. Kelvin orders that it is time for the counterattack. The other members are ready. A wounded soldier arrives at the main camp, where another commander reports that all the men are being slaughtered, as well as the beasts. The commander did not want to use the trump card. From behind they had been following that soldier. The commander has no choice but to use the call of an S-rank golem. Ryan is confident that he can fight this golem, but his sword breaks during the fight. This was a challenge for her. Melfina explains to her that if she defeats this golem, she will have become a complete adventurer. She did not want to disappoint the people who trust her. With the help of the faithful mascot and the slime, he manages to hurt the golem, but not everything would be so easy. Already that thing had a next-level transformation, but Ryan doesn't give up either. She pushes her limits, eliminating that golem. The commander cannot believe that a simple girl could defeat the golem. Ryan had won the fight. Kelvin was happy for her. A sudden attack falls on him. The person who attacked is surprised that he survived. The protagonist realizes that this guy was very strong, getting excited by this. That man watches Ethel in a grotesque way, asks her to become his slave, but Kelvin says not to dare to lay a finger on his girl. He uses his clinical eye to know the power of this man, then realizes that his abilities are mind control. He asks Ethel to go away. Kelvin gets mad at this guy, because he realized that he was also a reincarnated person. Starting the fight against that man, that guy is characterized by having the best magic shield. This guy had a lot of female warriors to help him in the fight. Kelvin summons some golems to help him with the fight, so he can fight alone against this pervert. During the fight, the guy gets hurt on his face, getting angry about it. He decides to use his best skill and put an end to all this. He formed a storm of magic with everything he had and thus took Kelvin down. While the protagonist had no choice but to use his improved ability to fight against such a tremendous power. A scythe forms from Kelvin's hands, ready to kill the pervert. As it was the first time he had used it, he had failed to aim. Meanwhile, on the floor, the pervert had survived, but his legs were destroyed. Kelvin is about to deliver the coup de grace, but the pervert was saved by another general of the Tricen Kingdom. That general says he cannot allow this subject to die, as he needs him for some experiments, saying that he leaves with a teleportation magic. The battle had ended in a draw. Kelvin apologizes for not being able to finish off that guy, but the group tells him that it couldn't be helped as they were powerful. All that remained was to practice more and outperform their rivals. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the pervert wakes up, but he was chained in all his limbs. The general says it's time for some experiments, starting a process of torture to improve his skills. The elves decide to throw a party. They had managed to protect the village from the invaders. Kelvin was far away meditating and observing the town. Ethel was looking for him and handed him a box. He explains that it was given to him by the village chief for saving the elves and also belonged to his mother. She pledges to keep striving not to be weak. The other members of her group arrive. They also did not want to lose to anyone. A little elf girl arrives and thanks him for saving the elves, but she wasn't just any little girl. This little girl introduces herself as Leonhardt. Kelvin couldn't believe this girl is that blissful king. Leonhardt explains that she used a shape-shifting ability. She explains that she has successfully passed her S-rank exam. To celebrate this promotion, you will have a battle against another S-rank adventurer. Kelvin is excited to hear this. Fighting against someone powerful was something he enjoyed. It was time to seek out more monsters and become powerful. End.